interpersonal communications research paper on the 2006 film The Pursuit of Happyness, and I am going to start off with the introduction. The background of the film is that it is based on a man named Chris Gardner, a true story in which he lives in and out of poverty, living from homeless shelter to homeless shelter and trying to make rents due by selling bone density scanner. And he is a salesman, and of course, because that doesn't work out, he eventually finds other ways, and eventually he's landed with an internship with the brokerage company, Dean Witters, and that is what eventually scores him to his future life. It goes through a lot of things. 3 concepts within interpersonal communications that I've chosen have been culture, language, and perception. I say culture gives the sense of identity, and for many people, it is a system of learning and sharing languages and values within each other. And I feel like in his lifestyle, the culture is his social class and his work culture. While as for language, it portrays many emotions verbally and non-verbally, and it gives an extensive outlook on the typical lifestyle of a person. It also sets the tone for the film overall of what we believe may or may not happen. Moving on, as well as perception. I think perception in the film, you can easily see it is always the point of view of the person, and it is what they use to be able to judge on someone else, how they feel properly and whatnot. And that's literally what it is in the film, in my opinion. So to go through the main topics in language, the language portion of the film, a big part of it, a big chunk of the movie itself is when Chris Gardner is mostly arguing with his wife, Linda. A lot of their arguing is based on their former interpersonal behaviors, and which dictate the lifestyle and the way and the tone that they speak, and the language patterns, of course. And we can tell that according to their relation, it begins to deteriorate. Therefore, the quantity of words that they speak to each other obviously diminish. It eventually at one point where Linda just talks to him with one word only, and that's all it is to his questions, and she responds to him one word. And the telling thing about it is, when I say language sets the tone, is before she leaves, she tells Chris Gardner that he'll be a great father to their kids, and she just hopes for the best for him. And regardless if they argue, because of that, that has later on helped him to agree to doing the internship and actually providing the life that he wants for his son. Moving on to perception, I wanted to say that in the film itself, the perception and the point of view is mostly in his view, of course. It's not necessarily first person when it's in the film itself, but during the monologue, it is his thoughts, his actions. So through that, he talks about a lot in his monologue. He talks to himself and how he inserts it as this time in my life was insert an adjective or whatever. Like he says, this time in my life was when I call stupidity, because it's an act of stupidity that he did, in his opinion. Or by the end of the film, he says, this moment in my life, I call it happiness. Because really, he finally achieved his happiness, which is the reason why, in his perception, throughout the film, he mentions Thomas Jefferson's The Pursuit of Happiness consistently. Because Thomas Jefferson's words in the Declaration of Independence is what had guided him in the first place to achieve his goals. It guided him, and it became his perception of what happiness really is and how to fight for that happiness. And finally, for culture is obviously, of course, his social class. He grew up in poverty. He was surrounded by poverty, and obviously having he is living in poverty as well, and he still wants to make it. He still wants to be able to score that for his son, be able to provide that lifestyle that he is needed, something that he just wishes that his son deserves. So yeah, besides that, another culture in his life is his work culture. His work culture identifies that you can see that he is in an out group. He doesn't really identify with these people. He doesn't have college experience. He doesn't have any of this. So he is in an out group in which he does not identify himself with these people, but he just forces and inserts himself in so that he can get the internship, so that he can score and do well on the internship. And another work culture influence is that he is an intern. So he's forced to do really tedious tasks and manage as an intern to prove his worthy, basically. And often interners often have to go through very simple and tedious tasks that make no sense, but it's just what they have to do because they are interns. And so therefore, for my conclusion, I wanted to tie in and have an understanding that that is what the film is about. I think the three concepts in interpersonal communications is that basically language, perception, and culture tie everything in together. Without language, any film or story cannot really continue on without the tone of it or the setting of it. For perception, you always want to know the person's point of view or where they're coming from to be able to make a proper judgment. And this goes for in real life too. Before you make a judgment on the news or your friend or whatever, you want to know the point of view, where it's coming from, and where you're taking it from your perception or the other person's perception. And for culture, I think it's very important because the style of environment that we grew up in or the influence that we've been raised by, whether it's our parents or whatever, really tie in to how we see the world later on, which I think is why I think those three concepts are very important to not just the film Pursuit of Happyness, but in all aspects of life. When you're reading, when you're working, or like you're just watching a film, those are the main things that really make interpersonal relations a relation itself. And so yeah, that is my presentation.